Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Character Day. It's been an amazing day. There's over 130,000 live events happening all over the world, all 50 states, 119 countries, all talking about character and meaning and purpose. And it's been amazing to see video clips and stills from everyone. And we just premiered our new movie, 30,000 Days, which looks at the 3,000-year history of questions around living with meaning and purpose from the Greek philosophers all the way to today. And I'm so excited about this next speaker because Moby's amazing. We're about to talk to him. He has inspired so many films just with his music. To me, his music represents big thinking. I always love going through his music to figure out what's going to be like that perfect sound to close a big idea. So I'm going to read his official bio. First, I'm going to go over to Moby. Hello, Moby.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm going to read your bio. Moby is an electronic singer, songwriter, author, and activist. Moby has also co-written, produced, and remixed music for David Bowie, Brian Eno, Public Enemy, and many others. He's a dedicated vegan, an animal rights activist, and an outspoken advocate of Tibetan independence, and an active volunteer for many nonprofits, including Move On and the Humane Society. In 2006, he released a memoir about his life, New York City, and music called Porcelain, a Memoir. It's so great to have you on today. I feel like you represent so much about creativity, which is one of the character strengths we talk about. And I just would love your thoughts about creativity and how it's evolved as you've gotten older.
That's a big question. As far as how it's evolved, you know, it's interesting because I had this experience about 10 years ago. I went to go see David Lynch talk at BAFTA, which is the British Academy of Film and Television.
Yeah.
And at this point in my life, I had gone off the rails a little bit. Like, I was drinking too much. I was going out too much. I was also, to my great shame, a little bit too concerned with the marriage of art and commerce. Like, I was actually, and I'm ashamed to admit this, like, I was thinking about the commercial aspects of art far more than I should have been. And David Lynch was being interviewed on stage, and the journalist was very erudite and kept asking very complicated questions. And the more complicated the questions were, the more simple David's answers became.
Interesting.
And at one point, the journalist said, it was a similar question to what you just asked. Like, I think the question was like, what's the role of creativity in your life and your work process? And David said something so simple. He simply said, he lifted his hands in the air and he said, well, creativity is beautiful. And all of a sudden, that struck me, and I was like, oh, that's right. Like, commerce sometimes is necessary, but is tawdry and gross. Whereas art and creativity, that's how we express ourselves and how we sort of like try and make sense of the human condition. And so all of a sudden, it was kind of like this Saul on the road to Damascus moment where I suddenly thought, like, what am I doing? Compromising creativity, which has the potential to be sublime, in the interests of commerce, which is by definition, at best, utilitarian, but usually kind of disgusting.
That's so interesting. And I just heard Sir Ken Robinson speak about creativity. Have you ever heard him speak?
He's the educator, right?
Yeah, he's an educator. And he was talking about creativity is just the way kids exist, that they're just created by nature. And he feels like the education system kind of drills it out of them, drills out the creative thinking, which was so interesting the way he's like, it's just a natural way of existing and being playful and questioning and curious and making unusual connections. And then it kind of gets drilled out of you at a certain point, which was so sad. But he has all these exciting ideas of bringing it back. But on that note, because I love that creativity is beautiful, because it's just like the lens that you can look at the world. But I mean, at a certain point, I kind of feel like when I have a lot of film work, I kind of think of it, and I hope this doesn't come out the wrong way, but like an athlete, like I go to bed really early because my most creative time is in the morning. So like, I know I'm most creative in the morning. So I'm like, I'm going to bed early. And I start to I put structure around when I know I'm feeling most creative to kind of build that muscle. Do you find that, or do you have any rituals?
It's funny. I was reading a book and I forget what it's called, but it's sort of a bunch of different writers talking about their creative process.
Mm.
And for the most part, everyone described the creative process similarly to how you were just describing yours. Like Solzhenitsyn had this rigorous schedule, like breakfast at 7, start working at 7:30.
I got that straight. I got that straight. That's straight. But sleep.
And it made me wonder, in a way, like I started thinking, like, what am I doing wrong? Because I've never had to have structure or discipline around creativity. I guess, not that I do it well, but I just keep doing it. And it makes me think of, I was reading, I forget the name of the book, but it was a book by an anthropologist who was spending a lot of time in Polynesia.
Uh-huh.
And he was with this one group of people, this one tribe, and he'd been there for a while. And at some point he asked them, he said, well, where are your churches?
Hmm.
And they're like, what do you mean, what's a church? And he was like, a church, like a specific place where you go to worship, and they were very confused. And they were like, well, what do you mean? Everywhere is a place where you go to worship.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it struck him. He was like, what a weird idea that we compartmentalize worship in that way, that like you spend traditionally like an hour a week in a building and that's your spirituality. And I sort of feel the same way about, for me at least, creativity is like, not to overstate it, but the idea of letting it sort of permeate and inform every aspect of my life. But also I was raised by super relaxed hippies. And I'm not a relaxed person, but the only thing I tend to have a sort of open, relaxed attitude towards is creativity. Like I'm uptight about everything else, but for some reason, when it comes to creativity, I can be a lot more sort of fluid and relaxed around it.
That's great. I mean, it's really nice to have you hear that, because I think when as I've gotten older, I really value sleep more, whereas when I was younger, I didn't. And I think that is my ritual of going to sleep early. But I think there's a lot of loose parts of creativity for me, like travel is very creative. I just feel like a lot of creativity coming from that. And it seems like what I'm struck by from your work, which I love, is, well, there's two things. Like I mentioned it in the intro, but I feel like your music is so open for big thinking. And when you're creating music, it just feels like it holds an infinite amount of space for thought. I don't know. Because a lot of music, I feel like when we're composing or we're using music for a film, I feel like it might be exciting music, but it's going to limit your own thought process. But I feel like yours is just very expansive, I guess is the word I would use. And when you're creating music, do you feel like an expansiveness when you're creating?
I mean, I think it's similar to almost every creative process. There's that old dichotomy, well, not dichotomy so much as dialectic between like inspiration and perspiration. Mm-hmm. So like the end goal, I think, with almost every creative process is to create something generous that feels effortless.
Yes. Oh, yes, that's exactly right.
But, the process of making it, the nuts and bolts of making it sometimes can involve so much like nitty gritty work. Like an example, like in a movie, and I'm stating the obvious, I mean, you're a filmmaker, so you know this, but like someone watching a movie can spend 2 minutes effortlessly transported by a scene without knowing that there are 30 people standing around and someone spent hours lighting it, and all the sound and all the production that goes in to creating something that will enable someone to have, ideally, a transcendent, effortless experience.
Yeah, okay, I'm so glad you used the word transcendent, because, we talk about character strengths, and it's based on this amazing work that identifies 24 character strengths and then common virtues that all cultures throughout history value, and transcendence is one of them. That's a much better word for your music. And I agree with you. Like, we were finishing our new film like last night before it premiered today, and there was so many little details. But then when we released it to the world, you're right. It should seem effortless. It should seem expansive for people to kind of think about these ideas about meaning and purpose, which are huge ideas, and how do you kind of create a space to have those ideas up. That I really like the articulation of that. And something else I really like about your work is that you try a lot of different mediums, which it's very it's kind of very playful, like you're experimenting in lots of different ways. And has that always been the case with you, or is that, you know, has that changed at all, or has it always been, you just...
Yeah, I mean, specifically in the world of music, musical creativity has always been very closely aligned or wedded to the idea of genre.
Yeah.
And there was almost a practical reason for that up until very recently, which was in order to play jazz, you needed a different skill set than to play classical music or than to be an electronic musician. And also, it was expensive to make music, it was expensive to record it, and it was expensive to buy it. So people almost had to like genre was like a calling card for the musician, but also the consumer, and it enabled them to invest their time and money wisely.
Right.
And now, practically speaking, it costs nothing to make music, and it costs nothing to consume music. And so I feel like ideas, and also the tools that someone used to make classical music now, it's the same tools that a DJ uses to make dance music.
Mm.
And as a result, I feel like just there's a fluidity around genre that didn't exist up until recently. And for me, I find that really emancipating, because as much as I like genre, my allegiance has always been to music's ability to communicate emotion.
Mm.
And it's almost, you know, going back to like the Mies van der Rohe idea of form versus function.
Mm.
Or was it Frankfurt? I think it was Mies who said that, you know, like, and people oftentimes get very wedded to the form of something. And to me, the form, if there's a practical utility to the form, great. Otherwise, ultimately, it's the function that is so much more precious.
I love that. Okay, so in our final, it already went so quickly, I don't want it to end. There's a couple things. I'd love for you to talk about your activism, because the way you've taken initiative on issues, you're very engaged with the world at large. And was that always something that you've done, or was there a particular moment where you were like, I need to participate more? Was there a moment like that for you, or has that been a thread throughout your whole life?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in 1965, so I sort of came of age at the end of Vietnam, you know, the Watergate trials, Woodstock, you know, so I was raised with this idea that, you know, a good life is ideally a life that involves some sort of altruistic purpose, you know, and the truth is, I wish that we lived in a world wherein we could all be stupid and selfish. You know, like it would be great to live in a world where things were so stable and so wonderful that we could all just watch reality TV and buy stupid things.
Let's not live in that world.
Like, it would be nice to live in a world where we could just be selfish idiots, but we don't live in that world. We live in a world that, again, not to overstate it or indulge in hyperbole, we live in a world that's an inch away from serious catastrophe. And so I feel like my selfish concerns just by definition pale in comparison to any of my sort of cause-based issue-oriented concerns. And also, the more, what I found in life is the more selfish I am, the more materialistic I am, the less happy I am.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
You know, and that's a recurring thing, as you were saying about sort of, you know, like the different characters and virtues. Selflessness and concern for like a bigger, greater cause, whether you're the Dalai Lama or the Pope or whomever, like everyone sort of agrees that selfishness leads to sadness and altruism leads to a sense of peace and contentedness.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of research that we share with Character Day, and we work with a lot of scientists that work on that research, and we hope to unleash it during these days of Character Day to really show there's evidence that to support all these things that I think we know intuitively, but it's great to have the science to back it up. It's been amazing to talk to you, and I want to let you know that we're going to close when we say goodbye to you, which I wish we didn't have to. We're going to show the 11-minute film we made called The Adaptable Mind, and we use your incredible music that we just saw from the music video at the end of our movie, and I think everyone viewing in from all over the world will see how your music is so transcendent. I'm so glad that is the word. So thank you, Moby, for doing everything you do in the world, and I love your music, and keep on looking at creativity as just a beautiful way that you just live in this world.
Well, thank you. It was really nice talking with you.
Okay, bye, Moby.